I want to, for our listeners, learn a little bit more about the whiskeys and have a little spiel at the beginning, but I guess we'll pick that up next episode. But
okay, well, this is a Japanese whiskey, so
you
we know that
a little,
about it.
You know a little bit about it. I know. This is cool. I've been on a mission to find a Japanese whiskey. I found one yesterday while I was picking up wings for the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah?
So the lady said in the liquor store that they sell it pretty quick of it. So I was trying to ask her if it was any good. She says, I don't know, I've never had it, but we sell it out pretty quick. So Santori Whiskey Toki. But you know a little bit, at least a little loose history about Japanese whiskeys becoming more popular.
Yeah, I think it's just because like there's this scarcity problem, right? Like you can only distill so much whiskey in Scotland, and it's a small country, and there's a couple billion Asian people who like whiskey, and so in order to try to fill that demand, people are starting to distill it in other places, and I think Japan was one of the first to really do it and try to perfect it. And I haven't ever tried it, but it's supposed to be good from what I've heard.
Yeah, there's this one bottle that I really want to get. It's almost impossible. It looks like it's a full samurai case around it, and you open it up and the bottle's in it. Now, I guess cousin-in-law, my wife's cousin, he married a Japanese girl, so they go to Japan a lot, and he brings it back. He says he gets it for like $50 over here. If you want to get it in the U.S., it's about $500.
Wow.
And just the empty bottle, which I looked for it on eBay, is $200 to $300. So it's a novelty item. So
right.
Next time he goes to Japan, I'll have to have him pick it up for me. And then to your Scotch story, one of my former coworkers was from India, which is, I guess, part of Asia, Asia Minor or whatever you want to call it. And he was going back to India, and I was like, bring me something from India. As a joke. He was serious. He's like, what do you want? I was like, I don't know, your favorite liquor. He brought me back a bottle of Scotch, which I was like, thank you, but
that's kind of odd. Yeah,
this is from Scotland.
Right.
I wanted something made in India.
I don't know what they make in India in terms of distilled spirits. I've never
sure
really.
There's something.
There's got to be something, but I don't know.
I'm always up for something new, so let's pour a little bit.
Yeah, feel free.
Despite the time of day.
It's nice and late in the afternoon right now. We should be fine.
And in Japan, maybe it's late.
It's definitely late in Japan.
Maybe it's 5 o'clock in Japan. So we'll drink to their health.
I'm interested to see if it is a different character from how like bourbon is different from Scotch and Canadian whiskey is different from all of them. I'm interested to see what the character of it's like.
It was in the Scotch aisle.
Okay.
That's where I found it. So I'm guessing it's going to be a little closer to Scotch than bourbon.
Okay. Let's try it.
Cheers, sir.
Cheers. Yeah, it's very scotchy. Very nice, very smooth drinking.
That was super smooth. That was very good.
Yeah, I wouldn't know that wasn't made in Scotland if you didn't tell me.
Yeah. The bottle itself and where it comes from adds the novelty, but it's good. It's not bad whiskey at all. It's a very good whiskey.
It's very good.
I will be able to happily share that bottle with many friends and not feel like I'm giving them the bad stuff. Like the dentist whiskey.
The dentist whiskey.
I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
Yeah, you can drink it eventually. You'll get, I'll be drunk one night and you want something else. And you won't care what it tastes like. That's how I get through all my lesser whiskeys that I have. So what's going on this week, Mike? What are we talking about?
So I drove in here this morning.
Yeah.
And still got to come all the back ways for one way.
Yes.
So the garrison of the Capitol, the People's House, is no longer the People's House.
It's really upsetting. So we're a couple blocks away from the Capitol, and we're like a couple blocks away from this giant barricade they've erected, which is looking like it might be permanent now. It's like, what is it, Ronald Reagan who said the most permanent thing ever is a temporary government program? And yeah, they said that they're going to put up this wall for the inauguration, and now they're saying they're going to keep it up through March for the impeachment trial, and I think now people are saying they're going to keep it up forever, and it's very distressing because, like, in my mind, the whole idea of America, the whole reason it was founded is to like give people a voice in government, to have a representative democracy, to let people be part of government. And there's this whole tradition of this, and it's gotten worse over time. But like, there's that famous story about Andrew Jackson who used to put the wheel of cheese out on his front White House lawn and let everybody come in and air their grievances. And like, you're supposed to be able to walk into your representative's office and say, hey, I got beef with you, or I need you to lobby you for this bill or something, and like, they've completely shut it down. Like, you can't get in. It's crazy.
I know. I'm kind of the same. Before you brought up this Andrew Jackson story, I was thinking, like, you used to be able to walk into the White House, and then that had to end, but at least you still had the Capitol, the People's House. And I'm a romantic for American history, for where we came from a principle, when we got plenty of scars and we're fallible human beings but it's our continual trying to strive for these set of principles that we set, and we always fall short, but we're like, nope, this is what we stand for, this is what we're striving for. And I feel like we change it now. We're going to wall off the Capitol. It's separating the people from the government. It's creating where they work for us. It's putting them up on the hill even further. Like, oh, there's the overlords in the castle, and all us peasants and serfs are down below.
Yeah,
Wonder they're going to ride out on their horses and throw us a loaf of bread.
It feels increasingly authoritarian and increasingly European in nature. Like, it just feels so un-American because, yeah, that's what people were running away from, is this idea of you have the monarch up there, untouchable. You're just a lowly peasant. You have nothing to do with the monarch. You don't have a say in government at all. And in America, you're supposed to have a say. You're supposed to be able to go and complain and protest. And like the First Amendment says, you have the right to peacefully petition your government for redress of grievances. Like, how are you supposed to do that if you can't get anywhere near them?
Yeah, you're gonna I feel like this is let them eat cake. You're clinging to the fence, looking in, wondering, and then these people are not better than the regular everyday Americans. These are just, they're morons, a lot of them, and somehow they managed to squeak their way into Congress. They've put on the pin, as Thomas Massey. They feel important. Now they're throwing up a wall, and it's a huge cultural we're going to accept it, and that means there's a huge cultural problem. We have to change how we look at government again. We have these cult of personalities. We worship them. We put them on pedestals, and then one side wants to rip them off the pedestals because they're literally the incarnate of Satan, and the other side is like, nope, this is the second coming, or this is at least a prophet from God, and both are grossly inappropriate.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about the Satan one. That might be a little bit more appropriate.
True. I'll hedge the bet that way for both sides.
I'm wondering if maybe there's a silver lining to it, and that people will kind of realize the true nature of government, because I feel like people have such a rosy view of government. They're like, democracy is us. Democracy is just these things we do together. And it's not really ever been that way. It's always been them telling us what to do. And, in my book, Our Servants, Our Masters, available now on Amazon.com.
Love the drops.
Yeah. I mean, talk about how, the language we use about government is they're our servants. They're public servants. They're representatives. They're there for us. And it's not really ever been the case that that's been true. They're always trying to tell you what to do. And I'm wondering if, this is probably overly optimistic, but I'm wondering if maybe this will start to let people wake up a little and realize, oh, they're not really here for me. They don't really care about me. They're here to protect themselves.
Yeah, do you think, we just witnessed, I feel like the one risk, I'll make the statement, it's a question statement for you to respond to.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I feel like, and we were just talking about this a little bit, yes, we want people to wake up and see government, and they're not truly here to take care of you. They should be looked at as your servants. Like, they should go out there and protect your liberty, at least, and property, etc., so you can go about your life pursuing happiness. But the risk of waking up and realizing that these are not benevolent elected officials who care about you is that what we saw on January 6th.
Right.
A storming. Instead of looking at it pragmatically, like, all right, we have this system of government, republicanism. What is the appropriate relationship from an elected official to the citizenry? And I feel like we're going to miss that point too. So I guess question one is, what do you think the risk of, and then leading to more occurrences like January 6th? Let's storm the Capitol. That becomes very French Revolution, Jacobin, the guillotine, someone erected the noose outside there. Like, that's not the direction we need to go either.
No, you're right. And it's a difficult thing, because I want people to wake up and realize that government is not your friend. Government is your enemy. It's not there to help you. It's not there to control you. But in doing so, I also want to stress that, violent revolution is a bad idea. And it's a terrible thing. Violence is awful. It never results in better outcomes. It always ends up like the Cuban Revolution or the French Revolution, just installing dictators. It's not the way to go. So we have to find a way to educate people on that and have them understand the true nature of government without then rioting in the streets and burning things down and blowing things up, because that's not the way to solve the problem. I really believe firmly that nonviolent resistance and a cultural change is the way to solve the problem, not just shooting people or breaking things down or things like that. And the storming of the Capitol, that's being used as the justification for this. They're saying, oh yeah, it's too dangerous. We have to put up this wall. We can't let anybody in near the government because these wacko white supremacists are going to do something. And they're saying there's going to be another one in March. I don't think there's going to be another one in March. I'll go on record now and say I would be surprised if there's anything like that in March. I don't think it's going to happen. But they're using that as the justification. And, fair enough, what happened in January was a bad thing, and that was a tragedy, and it should never have happened. But, it's not the first time it's happened. It's not the only time in history that there have been shooters in the Capitol. I was just doing research on this, and it's happened a bunch of times. There was a time in 1954 where some, what were they? I think Puerto Rican nationalists took guns into the gallery of the House floor and shot 4 representatives. So, it's happened before, and they never shut down the Capitol. They never said, "Oh, we're going to lock it off from the people." So it's just an excuse, really. It's not a unique time in history in that respect. It's just an excuse they're using, and they always use tragedy as an excuse to put more control over people.
There's been, I'm not going to even try to misremember. I just saw someone had citing other history of disaster and tragedy and violence that have occurred around or near the Capitol, and there was like a bomb went off at some point in our history within the Capitol.
Well, just a couple years ago, in 2017, there was that woman who ran into the Secret Service agent with her car by the White House and was trying to smash through the fence. There was, in the Women's March in 2018, just 3 years ago, they had like hundreds of people inside the Senate building, and I think like 400 of them got arrested. Oh, no, it was 600 of them. 600 women got arrested for being inside the Senate building during the Women's March. They weren't killing anyone, but they were trespassing. They were there when they shouldn't have been there, and they were, protesting in an improper way. So like this happens all the time. It's happened a bunch of times in history. It's not a unique time, but they're trying to write the narrative that we've always been safe until these crazy Trump supporters, until these crazy white nationalists, and now we're not safe anymore, and now we have to change everything.
And it's absolutely because of who the people that did the violence on January 6th were. They were of the right. If it was the left that had done the violence that we had saw across America through the summer, both are wrong, both are riots, both are immoral and incorrect.
Agreed.
But the narrative we're going to run with is, I believe, correlated and causal to who it was.
Oh,
it
absolutely.
Was people on the right.
I mean, look at the congressional baseball game where Steve Scalise got shot and Rand Paul was there, and that was a left Bernie supporter. What year was that? 2017?
Yeah,
2015, something like that.
It was after. It was the post. Trump was president.
Yeah, 2017, I think it was. Yeah. So like they shot a member of Congress during the congressional baseball game practice. And like they didn't do any, they didn't shut down congressional baseball games. They didn't shut down practices. They didn't like lock all their members into their homes anymore because it was a left winger going after right wingers. They just said, "Oh, it's an isolated incident." You're right. I mean, the narrative is so dangerous and people believe this stuff. I've been talking to people and they're like, "Oh yeah, well, we have to have this up because the white nationalists are coming. The white nationalists are coming." I'm like, they're not coming. There's like 10 white nationalists in the whole country.
Yeah, if you actually look at like KKK membership, it's like 8,000 members. Yeah. Like that's not even worth noting on a graph.
It's just such a disproportionate response to the actual threat. It's kind of crazy to me.
And to the baseball and the Steve Scalise incident, at no point in time did we blame Senator Bernie Sanders for the violence carried out by someone that was his alleged supporter. He had visited Bernie Sanders' office the day before and then goes out to carry out this violence. But because Ted Cruz stood up and protested against the certification of Arizona or Pennsylvania, AOC is like, Ted Cruz is the equivalent of trying to have me murdered, even though I wasn't in the Capitol.
Been really, really intense on this stuff, saying that she was, the target of murder attempts and stuff. Which she's changed her tune, by the way, because like the day after this happened, I saw her tweeting about how someone stole her shoes, and she had like kind of a jokey tone of voice. She's like, "Guys, seriously, you stole my shoes? What's going on?" And then like 2 weeks later, when she decided it was advantageous, suddenly she's fearing for her life, and she thinks she's a target of murder attempts.
And then it comes out that she was in the office building, which there is tunnels that connect it all, but if you look at the Google Maps version of it,
pretty far away.
I've been in both buildings.
Yeah.
You could be in the office building and not know what was going on across the street.
Totally.
I've been in both. I have family members that have worked in the house, so I have friends. I've been there. Mm-hmm. You could have just gone about your day in that building.
Yeah, so I'm real concerned about and then there was this anti-terrorism bill where they want to target libertarians and say that they're, danger to an enemy of the state, which I'm happy for the label enemy of the state. I think that's appropriate.
That's what we've been going for.
We've been going for that, but it's clear that the narrative is right-wingers, libertarians, which aren't necessarily right-wingers, are dangerous and they need to be shut down because of this one incident. And you don't get the same thing when the left does something like the entire summer of Black Lives Matter riots and Antifa riots.
No, I mean, it's
very scary. I'm really terrified about the direction the country's going because it just feels like it's getting more and more, police state. Yeah. Like there's all these National Guard members in D.C. with guns around, and it feels like something you would see in like Moscow. It's just not what you expect to see in America. And
today, I see people popping up in the trunks with guys with guns, and they're looking in the trunks, and like this is not what we're supposed to be doing. But to what you had said earlier, you said people are believing this, or my question, I guess, is I try to fathom why. Like, how is it? And I look for, like, people on the left. I have many friends on the left that actually like this, and people that I follow that are actually very pragmatic, or they look at, like, their consensus. Like, I have friends on the left that are calling, complete bullshit on this. Like,
that's good. I'm glad to hear that. I don't have any of those friends.
but there's not. I don't have many. They're they're actually my friends that are much smarter than me, and actually that's why I enjoy their company. Like, oh, these people are more well read than myself. They challenge me. They ask pointed questions. But I have noticed they're very intellectually honest. Like, they believe the left is the way to go. They're proud Democrats, but they're being pretty pragmatic, and they actually they're the old school liberals. They believe in free speech.
I like those guys. I'm glad they're around.
Yeah,
there's not too many of them anymore.
I could count that's 2 or 3 people in my life. But I don't know. What's your thought? Why do you think we so easily accept it? We do it both on the left and right. We accept this narrative.
Well, it's just because it's all you hear, and it's like, if you go on Facebook and you have friends that are on the left, you see it all day long, posting these things, posting these same articles and these same quotes and these same memes, and they're just saying the same thing over and over again, and you start to believe it. And all the news networks that you watch, if you're on the left, you watch CNN, you watch MSNBC, and they all say the same thing, and like, you don't get a contradictory point of view. So you're like, yeah, I guess that must be true because that's what everyone's saying.
Do you?
Like, I was out with a friend this weekend who was on the left, and she was talking about how she wanted to get Chick-fil-A because they fund the death of gay people in Uganda, I think it is. And I was like, I don't think that that's true. But I went home and I looked it up, and even PolitiFact, which is a very left-leaning organization, they said that that's not true. Like, there's this like real tenuous connection you can draw if you want to like follow the money 4 or 5 steps down the line, that maybe like someone was in Uganda who Chick-fil-A gave money to, who was advocating for some bill that was advocating for the death penalty.
Just looking for one data point.
But like,
make that.
Yeah, it's like, it's so tenuous. It's such a thin thread. And like, you could do that with any major corporation that gives money to lots of foundations. If you follow the money 3 or 4 steps down the line, you can find something egregious that they're giving money to. Not to mention what the government gives money to. But like, they just believe this because they've been told it. They've heard it over and over again. And so they just think, yeah, it must be true. And same thing on the right. Like, you get in your echo chamber, you hear people say the election was stolen, and you're like, oh, I guess the election was stolen, even though there's no evidence that that's the case.
Even if you tell someone there's no evidence, or it's not true, they'll be like, no, of course there is. And you're kind of stuck in this.
Yeah, you get stuck in a loop. You get stuck in a loop, and you really have to like make an effort to open your mind to what the other side is saying and investigate it and see, is there merit to what the other side is saying? Are they right about this? And most people aren't willing to do that. And so it's tough because, you have a caricature of the other side as they're all ill-informed. If you're on the left, you think everyone on the right is stupid. If you're on the right, you think everyone on the left is an NPC, and you just won't listen to them. And so, a lot of what is circulated is not true on both sides, but it takes effort to find out what's true and what isn't.
I think, to what you just said, you just said, that just struck me. You said, you have to actually listen to what people are saying. And I think that's a very true statement, in the sense that I feel that we have, as a society, as a culture, as individuals, we have to look internally. I think we're all somewhat probably guilty of it. But it's hard to miss because everyone's doing it now. Or it's easy to miss because everyone's doing it. We've become more ideological. And I've mentioned this to you, versus being principled. And I'll give an example of one of my friends who I was talking to this about. And he was talking about a story where he recently got a book. I can't remember what it was. It was written by someone on the left. He is very much, I guess, conservative on the right. But he was reading it, he said, and the lady made a critique of, this is what you get, and it's not a direct quote, of Hayek-type capitalism. He's like, oh, great, here it goes. Blame the market for all my problems. And so he said, what he realized is like, ooh, that's my ideology kicking in. I'm going to immediately write this person off who's a very serious author, who's an intelligent person, who's trying to tell an idea. Like, let me put that to side and like try to figure out what she's actually saying here. And he's like, when he changed that mindset, he actually thought she had some very valid points that, and I won't go into them. And he's like, where, she might be more of I believe, he believes in the free market, and she doesn't, but he actually sees like her critique in this situation was valid. But if he had not removed his ideological glasses there, he might have never gotten it. So I think, to what you had just said, I think something that an idea I've been messing around with is, we've become so ideological that it's easy for us to put people in black and white. This person's good, this person's evil. I'm going to write off everything you say. Everything you say is gold, and there's no middle ground. Or
I will push back a little on that, because I actually don't think ideology is a bad thing. I think ideology is a good thing. I think ideas are what make the world go around, and ideas are important, and we should pay attention to ideas, and we should adopt the good ideas and reject the bad ideas. So ideology, I don't think, is a bad thing. I think partisanship is a bad thing, but I think partisanship and ideology are almost opposites, because partisanship is just following what one side says because one team says because they're that team, whereas ideology is I have my set of principles and my set of ideas and I'm following those regardless of who's saying them and what they're talking about. So I don't really have a problem with ideology. I don't think ideology and principles are that different. I think ideology and partisanship are very different.
Yeah, so I think there we might be defining our terms a little different.
Probably.
I see ideology as everything fits. This is my ideology. Like, these are my given truths, and everything has to fit within that truth. Like, everything I take in has to fit within that truth. Where principles are, maybe I have to flesh out that definition a little bit more. But I feel like ideology is like a lens you put on, and you can't see outside of this box or these blinders, and it's like everything must fit and explain within my ideology, and it almost becomes you're not willing to challenge you're potentially wrong or true. Like, I certainly have my ideology, like I have my political ideology, this is what I think is true, but I try to remain it unattached a little bit. I try to have something inform it. I don't want my ideology to inform what I pursue. There's got to be something higher than ideology, I think, is where I'm taking this idea. Something has to inform it, so you can move it or change it if necessary.
But the only thing that can inform it is an idea, and that idea then becomes part of the ideology, because ideology has the word idea in it.
Yeah, and I need to flesh that out a little bit. So for me, this is a personal, and this is something I'm really exploring and contemplating and trying to just read more. So I haven't really ironed it out. So this is a work in progress. So have mercy on it.
That's fine.
The
way you're using ideology is the way most people use ideology, I think, and people often have a pejorative connotation with ideology and say it's a bad thing, but I always challenge that a little, because to me I think that having a consistent set of ideas that guide you is important to being intellectually honest and to being a whole person. And I think the alternative to having a consistent set of ideas that guide you is to just not have any ideas and to just sort of be I don't like Obama
mind
said,
side open, that you're
we don't care about ideology, we only care about doing what works. Well, like what works there's a different definition of what works depending on what your ideas are and what your goals are. And I think being clear about where your kind of first principles of where you're starting from and your premises of how you view the world is important to being able to have a conversation with someone and understand where they're coming from.
There's a Chesterton quote, maybe to your point there, something about or maybe it's a C.S. Lewis quote about you want to be open-minded, but only open-minded enough for the truth to come in that you then close around the truth. Or if you're completely open-minded, nothing gets in permanently.
Chesterton has a whole rant about this, and it's like turnips are singularly broad-minded. Trees have no dogmas.
Yes, you need a dogma almost.
Yeah, so that almost disagrees with what you were saying. Is like Chesterton was a big fan of dogma. He's like, you need dogma to guide you, and if you're too open-minded, you have nothing.
Yeah, so you would equate dogma to ideology.
A little bit, yeah.
Would you call, so that's interesting. I wouldn't call my Catholicism.
But I wouldn't call it dogma.
I wouldn't call my Catholicism an ideology. I would say that's what informs my ideology.
Interesting.
Same with so I look at economics, Austrian economics specifically. I don't want it to be an ideology.
Yeah.
So there's a dogma to economics. It's like an accepted truth that the individual is the root, and all we're doing is we're maximizing based on our constraints. And our constraints are knowledge, what our subjective value to things. Right. And that's objective. That's a dogma.
Well, yeah. I mean, economics is not normative in that they don't say what should be. It just describes what is.
Yes.
And then you have to have some kind of an ideology or some kind of a dogma to inform how you use that tool of economics to decide what the good is and what the bad is and what your goals are.
My libertarianism is more my ideology, but I'm not so committed to it that I don't want my libertarianism to form my dogma of Catholicism. Like, this is what I hold as true and unmovable. My libertarianism, I'm willing to let it move and shift.
Yeah.
Ideas change. I can come across new knowledge. I can be convinced of something otherwise.
Right.
So I call that my ideology. So I don't know. That's just how I'm working through it.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what your kind of highest good is.
Yep.
And for me, my highest good is, individual freedom. And so anything else is subservient to that in my worldview. So I'm always going to accommodate everything else to fit that goal. But if your highest good is something other than that, then you're going to say, well, I'm willing to compromise on individual freedom to achieve my other highest goal. So
maybe we'll get into that another time. We were talking a little bit about, and I want to get into in this podcast, authority versus power.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about that at some point, because that's an interesting topic and something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately.
So, and what was the other thought? Again, I have all these ideas. I've taken these ideas. I hear these statements. I ponder. I'm like, I'm gonna save this for Logan because you come from a different angle than I do.
What is so like you said that your ideology is informed by your Catholicism.
Yeah.
What is like the point of Catholicism for you? What's the ultimate good of it that makes you loyal to it?
Can you just expand on that to make sure I'm understanding you correctly? Like, just
like
expound upon that.
What in Catholicism is the most important to you? What is it that brings meaning to your life? What is it that is it the glorification of God? Is it trying to become more spiritually enlightened? Is it trying to achieve the afterlife? Like what's the point of it for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and maybe I should ponder that more. From I guess off the cusp of that question, and I hope I satisfy you somewhat. So my Catholicism to me is something that it definitely gives my life meaning, but it gives me meaning in it's a sacrificial thing. Like a lot of people that I hear is like, oh, I don't get anything out of religion. I didn't get anything out of this church service, so it's not for me. I get something out of my Catholicism because it's something I almost sacrifice myself to.
Okay.
I will suspend. It restricts me in certain ways, but through those restrictions, I find freedom.
Yeah.
It's something that I order my life towards. It literally is the dogma. This is truth, and I will move my life around this truth. And of course, I challenge it all the time. I've had to come to this over the course of my adolescence and in college. Like it's been challenged many times, and I've had to defend it, and I want it to be true. So there's a bias there, but I have to go and seek out to confirm that, like, this is what I true. Is this person right? And you know, for a variety of ways, I seek out the truth. So it's something that I sacrifice myself into a way, and it informs it. Like, this has to be true.
Right.
And through that, you glorify God. But I get so much back through it.
Okay.
Like, it fulfills me in a way. It gives my life a grander purpose beyond just my utility function in life.
Right.
If all I have is my utility function, my life's very empty.
Well, I don't believe in utility functions, so I'm with you on that. We used to have a joke around the office, like making fun of utilitarians because we're like, "Oh, I got to get more utils. Got to get me some more utils. I got 5 utils today."
I feel like that's like our society, though. Like if you look, I'm not good on Instagram.
No.
The only thing I do on Instagram, I do enjoy, like, you hit like the video button, and I'm gonna sound like a boomer now. But you see these clips of people in exotic travel destinations that are just beautiful, and I'm like, man, I would love to go to these places. And like, I have 3 kids, and I have no sign of having any. I'm gonna have more kids.
Yeah.
I'm never gonna go to these places, and it's kind of depressing. But then when I think about that, like, we live in a very materialistic society in the sense of, like, how do we achieve meaning is by what we can accumulate. You know, oh, I can afford this, or our credentials, like, oh, I've been to this place, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I think if you ask anyone, that's a very unsatisfactory, like, even if we like it, like, oh, I'm Logan, I lived in this place, and I just traveled to, you know, Egypt, whatever.
Yeah.
You know? It's very unsatisfactory, though, when you reflect upon it. And I'm like, so it's something I've tossed and turned with. As much as I want that, Catholicism kind of pulls me out of that. It helps pull me out of that. I struggle with it just like anyone.
I was just having this conversation with someone about the Jordan Peterson book, 12 Rules for Life, and he was saying how, like, happiness shouldn't be your goal. Like, taking on responsibility should be your goal, because when people just focus on happiness, they do these things like travel to Egypt and stuff, and they're unfulfilled, and they just think, oh, I'll buy a lot of stuff, and I'll do a lot of travel, and I'll have a lot of money, and then I'll be happy. And it's like, it doesn't work. And I don't really agree with Peterson on that, because I mean, I kind of agree with him, but I disagree on the specifics, because I think that happiness is important and happiness is the goal, but the people just don't know how to pursue happiness correctly. They're pursuing happiness through what they think will make them happy, and it doesn't actually make them happy. They need to be pursuing things that will actually make them happy, which generally involves some level of responsibility.
Yeah, there's to that point, I think Jordan Peterson would agree with this. This might catch people off guard, and yourself, I bet you push back. I think we want suffering in some way. Now, I'm terrified of suffering.
Yeah.
I do not want to suffer, but I think we also want it. And by suffering, I mean we want the struggle more than the end result. Like, you look at the Super Bowl was last night.
I wouldn't really say suffering, but I'd say a challenge.
A challenge,
sure.
But it's something where we're uncomfortable.
Where your reach exceeds your grasp.
Yeah,
you know?
We're uncomfortable. We have to put ourselves in an uncomfortable situation. But even when we get an uncomfortable situation that was against our will, or we didn't plan it, or it shows up in our life in some way, we're like, my gosh, why did this happen to me? And we struggle through it. I think there's some fulfillment in that I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have a degree in this. It's just my own. It's my own personal experience. Is there's some draw, as much as we claim, like, I want happiness and I want all this, I want all my utils.
Yeah.
there's something to a struggle.